Hey, hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, excuse me, aka Dub the Deuces 85. I'm alive, guys. I am alive after a truly horrific battle with the worst possible variant of the flu that you can imagine. Multiple urgent care stays, couple of hospital stays. It was a brutal 10 to 14 day period for your guy, which is why I haven't been around much. No shows, just couldn't couldn't cover anything. And it takes a lot for me to not be around because you guys know I grind multiple sports at once during March Madness. There's frequently times where I don't sleep and just grind through the tournament. Like, it takes a lot for me not to be around to do content, whether that's a show, Discord exposures, articles, whatever. Truly was, I know it's kind of cliche to say this, truly was on my deathbed. Could barely move. Only time I could even move was to like literally throw up whatever I was trying to drink or eat. A pretzel here, a swig of Gatorade here, just all back up. About 4 to 5 days living like that. Family finally said they had had enough, essentially carried me to the car, took me to the hospital. They hooked me up to the IV, gave me a couple of fluid bags, some nausea medication. The nausea with this particular flu is just awful. And then, even after that, when I got back after like an overnight stay, or it wasn't quite an overnight stay, but I was there all day. And it took several days for me to still kind of like be available for what was going on. Like, I was around, but I got to thank Mike Kutry for covering me during that time period, because literally just the worst illness possible, the most sickest I've ever been. Everyone in my family got it, but they all recovered within like 2 to 4 days. But for whatever reason, it just latched on to me. And needless to say, I'll be getting a flu shot every year going forward. The older I get, I'm just not recovering fast enough on things. I don't really drink or do anything like that for obvious reasons. And man, I'll tell you, I know it sounds dramatic, but I truly felt like I was on the morphine drip deathbed. Just a horrible experience. Just like getting 20 minutes of sleep where I didn't feel like throwing up or dry heaving was like heaven. I got to that point where I was just like, oh, please let me get 10 minutes of, uninterrupted sleep where I don't feel nausea. But I'm back and I'm here. Done a couple of articles. The weekend, we just did a Discord thing. Have done a couple of articles last week. Did the article today. Hootry's on Tuesday, but now we're getting back in the swing of things. Monday night CBB show. Also going to be doing this week a Thursday night college football show. Bowl games starting, Friday, Saturday. So I'm going to be talking about some bowl game stuff. And then Friday night, I will be covering the college basketball main slate for Saturday. Kutry's covering tomorrow for written, but rest of the week, written content for college basketball. I'll be doing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. My man Jay Kuchek is going to write up the 2-game college football bowl game slate for Friday. I'll have an article for the Saturday slate as well, in addition to the show. So we're back in the swing of things. I don't quite feel 100%. I'm still not myself just yet. So please bear with me. You may see me off screen, cough, or on screen, blow my nose, take a swig of water like I always do. Just bear with me. Still kind of, healing up here, I guess. But damn it, I'm here and we're ready to make some money. And, I still played a little bit, like, threw some lineups in, didn't do any research, obviously. I'm on my deathbed, right? And threw a couple of lineups in here or there, and almost had a takedown lineup one of the days. So that was pretty comical, didn't follow, just woke up the next morning and saw that, hey, I got, second in the jam. That's pretty cool. But that is enough of the sick talk. Thank you guys for sticking with me and bearing with me. Those of you who've been with me for several years know that I just don't take days off. It's not my thing to do. I never do it. I always get people, asking, hey, you want me to help cover articles, blah, blah, blah. And I'm usually like, no, I got it all. But I am accepting help this week. Mike, Jake's going to help me with college football. Mike's going to help me with college basketball until I get to be 100%. But, looking at myself on camera, I don't look very good, but I'm here and I'm ready to grind through it. So the Daily Handle says, sorry to hear. Good to see you back. Thank you, man. Definitely brutal. And I'm happy to be somewhat healthy now because that was not fun. I wouldn't wish that flu on anyone. And I think the kind of, I myself thought this way too, but like the flu's thought of as just like, you're out for a couple of days, you drink your fluids and maybe you throw up, maybe you have the other end, right? And you just get over it and it's whatever. But this particular flu was like some kind of COVID hybrid, like massive, just monstrous beast. It wasn't actually COVID, like I was negative for COVID, but the doctor did say that because, we all were demasking and, got over COVID and people kind of going back out into the world and coughing on themselves and all that, not washing their hands or whatever. I wash my hands and all that, but just being back in the public eye and back in the world, this variation of the flu just was a hellacious mutation of this. And it came with a truly devilish, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Get a flu shot. I'm not like any kind of, not get a shot and do this. And, let me give you tips. Like, I'm never going to be telling you to do that. I don't want anyone to go through what I went through because if you have to go to the hospital for the flu, it is a really crappy experience. You got to sit in a line, 6-hour wait in the lobby, basically just throwing up all over myself in the lobby. And it was just not a fun experience. So enough of that, though. Let's get into the college basketball slate. We have a 3K to first jam we're going to talk about here. 6 games, pretty solid 6-game slate, if I do say so myself. Starts off with NC State and Furman. Caps off with my Washington Huskies versus Cal Poly, which these Huskies, you just never know. You can't assume that they're going to beat Cal Poly. So we'll get into some betting stuff as well and any props, prize picks, all of that good stuff as well. But first, let's talk about the first game on the slate here. My internet's a lead. The NC State versus Furman game. And this is one that I definitely feel like is going to be a very solid game. NC State, DFS-wise, they've got it going on offensively. Defensively, just okay. They're 6.5-point favorites against Furman. It is a total of 153.5, so definitely some fantasy goodness to be had here. Furman comes into this one 7-3. Solid win over Belmont. They beat South Carolina by 19. Solid win over Winthrop, Appalachian State, and then tough losses. Close loss to Penn State. Close loss to Old Dominion, and a close loss to High Point. So this one should be close. I think Furman has a shot to cover that 6.5 and maybe even, be within one possession here. The names to know for Furman, they have several players who have been there for a few years now that we'll recognize. They've lost quite a bit, but Mike Bothwell, Jalen Slauson, those are the 2 names that have been there the longest at this point, both seniors. Bothwell, shot rate of 27.8%, usage rate of 26.8%. He's definitely the top dog on the team, shooting 33% from long range on just under 40 or 50 attempts, 26.5% assist rate. He is drawing about 4.5 fouls per 40, and he has an offensive rebounding rate of 8.1%, which is pretty solid for a 6'3", 195 guard. Through the years, Bothwell, he has last year a usage rate of 25%, year before that 24.5%, year before that 20%, as a freshman right around 19%. So typically a pretty high usage guy. He's been a starter for a couple of 2.5 seasons now. This is definitely his team. He is the guy for them, and I think this could turn into a nice little Bothwell versus Turk battle where they're just trading buckets. Looking at Bothwell, he has not been under 30 fantasy points since the first game of the season, which was a 91-55 blowout against a lesser opponent. Since then, he's been over 32 fantasy points in each. So a pretty safe option at that 8-1 price point, somebody that I think we can definitely look at. Slauson at 8.5, probably less apt to play him. Just take the discount of 400. Slosson's definitely solid. 23% usage rate, 20.4% shot rate. He's also shooting 33% from long range, 24% defensive rebounding rate, 23.5% assist rate, 5.6% block rate, 3.1% steal rate. Slosson has been more of a late bloomer. Last year, he had a 26.5% usage rate. Before that, he was pretty much between 18 to 19%, more of a third or fourth option on this team. And now has become, a really solid de facto number 2 behind Bothwell with Alex Hunter gone. They still have Marcus Foster. Who's the other guy that they lost? Noah Gurley, who we know he played some time in the SEC. Clay Mounts, all those guys gone. It's really just a 2-man show essentially for Furman at this point. Other starters for Furman, if we're looking in that direction, because there is some value to be had here potentially. JP Pegus played 37 minutes last game. Garrett Hyen, and then Marcus Foster. Bench-wise, Ben Vanderwall, Alex Williams, and Tyrese Hughley. They're basically a 6 to 7-man rotation because Williams and Hughley playing roughly 5 to 10 minutes, Vanderwall around 20. So definitely a short rotation for the Paladins. You love seeing that. JP Pegue shooting 41% from long range, 18.8% shot rate, sitting there at 4.9. Definitely a guy that I think we can use as a value option. Marcus Foster sitting there at 4.6, another potential value option. 18.7% shot rate. Not much of a three-point shooter, although he has attempted 31 shots from long range, only 23% though, and a 16.7% usage rate. Nothing to write home about, but again, 4.6% going to be playing, over 30 minutes in this short rotation. Definitely like that. And then Garrett Hyen at 5K there, playing the 5 spot, basically 6'9", is not a real tall guy. They're a smaller team, but he will be playing the 5 there next to Slosson. Rates on him, 18.7% usage rate, offensive rebounding rate of 8.1%, shooting 54% from long range for a big guy on 13 attempts though. Fouls called rate is 7.7, 3.9. Just looking at Tyrese Hughley. So 3.9 on him, not horrible. 2-point field goal, he's shooting 67% on 42 attempts. Not a great free throw shooter, but is generating points. Does have a very high effective field goal and true shooting percentage, top 25 and top 75 in those categories, respectively. So I think at 5K, he's definitely a solid option. I think my favorite play, if I'm paying up, is clearly Bothwell here. And then I'm looking to probably Foster, Hyen, and Pegus in that order. Slosson would be the last for 400 more. I don't think he's a better play than Bothwell. I think majority of the field will probably agree, making Slosson a pretty solid GPP option. On the NC State side, we know at this point Turk Smith is that guy. He hasn't had to be a high-level scorer like he was last year. That has been a bit of a disappointment for me personally. He comes back. Everybody expects him to go to the NBA, myself included. Comes back, makes that surprise decision. But he's doing some other things that he didn't last year that's kind of showing him to be a more well-rounded option, which will ultimately help him for the next level of his basketball career. Usage rate, 27.8% compared to 26% last year, so that's up. 27.4% shot rate compared to 29.5% last year, so that's down. Assist rate, 28.9%. That is up from last year of only 14.7%. In 2 conference games so far, 34%. So in ACC games, he's really looking to dish the rock, get more guys involved. You love to see it. 3% steal rate compared to 2.4% last year. And he's shooting 35% from long range on 96 attempts compared to 37% last year. Pretty much in line there. Close game against Miami last time out. A couple of days ago over the weekend, they lost 80-73. He played 39 minutes. 28% usage rate, 19 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 block, 1 steal. A pretty well-rounded outing there. 3 for 11 from downtown, though. 7 for 17 overall. So you will have to see him hit more of those shots. The game before that against Coppin State, he did knock down 6 of 12 threes, so a little bit more confident there against that Coppin State squad. Obviously a lesser team. And then the game before that against Pittsburgh in a close loss, 15 points on 3 of 8 long range shooting, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. So again, some really nice secondary stats there that we weren't getting from Turk last year. He was playing a lot more like Cam Thomas during his one season at LSU. Turk's looking a little bit more like JFL of DePaul fame from the last couple of seasons, where he's contributing in steals, contributing in assists, and other categories. That makes him a much more viable option. If you're going to pay this almost $9K price point for my guy, having him be multi-dimensional and not just one-dimensional scorer is definitely great. He popped that 55 against Coppin State. I think more often than not, he's going to be sitting in the mid-30s. Going up against Furman, this is definitely a spot where I think, he can do some serious damage. Furman, tempo-wise, they're 106 in the country right now. Defense, pretty mediocre. NC State playing at 46th fastest tempo in the country at this moment. It's a little bit faster paced of a game. I think Turk is definitely a fine option overall if you want to go there, or you have the salary, or you're not going to go with Bothwell, who I still think is a better play than Turk. And I'm the biggest fan of Turk that there is. You have Jarkel Joyner, the transfer from Old Miss there at 7'6". He's a very strong option for 1K less than Turk. He is definitely allowing Turk to be less of a, reliant on the scorer, take some of that pressure off and allow him to be much more of a well-rounded player. Joyner has a shot rate of 23.1%, a usage rate over 22%, shooting 40% from long range, drawing almost 5 fouls per 40, 78% free throw shooter, just an overall well-rounded player himself. Old Miss, he was very strong scorer, high usage guy, had some injury issues last year. When he was with Cal State Bakersfield before that, he was obviously a high level scorer as well. So just bringing that over there. They brought him in thinking that Turk was going to be gone. So the fact that he came back, it really allowed him to play a different role in this backcourt. So those two together is a really strong backcourt. DJ Burns sitting there. Burns is actually the Winthrop transfer playing much better than I imagined he would be. In his last game especially was strong. He's sitting there second on the team in usage at 24.5%, shot rate of 24.5% as well, 25% combined rebounding rate, which 10.3% of that is offensive rebounding rate, and then a 4.2% block rate. So Burns, I think, has a chance to really put a hurting on this Furman squad. He's 6K, so we're not getting a big discount, but you see there against Miami, he really held his own against Norchad Omier. In that front court of the Hurricanes, 16-8, 1 steal, 2 blocks, 2 assists for 35 fantasy points. Now, more often than not, he's going to be in the upper teens there, but I think they're going to start turning him loose a lot more. GPP type of option, definitely. You have Jack Clark sitting there at 6'4", another pretty strong overall option, capable of scoring and doing some other things. Wasn't great against Miami, but before that, he had 5 straight games over 20 fantasy points. Against Elon, he really flashed upside, scoring 45 fantasy points. Started the season off with back-to-back 37-plus fantasy point games as well. Had foul trouble. Fouled out in 11 minutes against Miami, so something there to monitor. 6'4", an okay price point. Probably, again, just a GPP guy there for me, but I think he's fine. You have Casey Morcell at 6'2". I'm not going to be fooled by Morcell. Now, I did get fooled by Morcell 3 games ago. Played him against Pittsburgh. He had been playing pretty well. It was one of those last guy in situations. You had that mid 6K range, and it's like, maybe I can play Casey Morcell. I'm going to put some trust in him. I think he's turned the corner here. And sure as hell, he did not turn the corner. He did play 40 minutes against Pittsburgh, but he only managed to score 15 fantasy points. So it's immediately written off for me. And I know a lot of people, he was like 35% owned in that Miami game. And he burned a ton of folks as he comes back with an 11.5 fantasy point game in 34 minutes of action. So Morcell's playing a lot, but he's playing like the previous iterations of Casey Morsell from the last couple of seasons. He very well could bounce back and have a nice game here against Furman, but who the hell wants to pay 6-2 and to find out? He had a good game against Kansas, 42.5 fantasy points. He had, a couple of 25 spots early in the season, a 40 against FIU, 25 against Dayton. But where you really started to see the Casey Morsell of yesteryear was against Butler, when he had 8 points, 3 rebounds in 34 minutes, just under 18 fantasy points. And now 3 of his last 5 games, he's been under 20. So I think Morsell is going to be one of those guys where he shows out okay in initial projections, and people are going to roster him. I will not be one of those people. I admittedly played him against Pittsburgh, and I will not be playing him again. If I lose because of Casey Morsell, that's fine. I highly doubt I'll be losing because of Casey Morsell. For me, Jarkel Joyner is the number 1 option on the Wolfpack from a DFS perspective. Then Turk Smith, if I can afford him, followed by Jack Clark, DJ Burns, and then Casey Morsell would be last option. All right, we have Citadel versus North Carolina next. This is a game that should be full of fantasy goodness as well. North Carolina is a 26-point favorite, 145.5 over under. Let's start with the Citadel, the players you need to know if you're going to look in their direction. The Citadel, typically a pretty porous defense each year, and they are again under Ed Conroy. And they have been a team that has played pretty fast-paced over the last 3 or 4 years. They've been top 10 in tempo in 3 of the last 4 seasons. This season, the defense is still terrible like it always is, but their tempo hasn't been what we're accustomed to. And that has to do a lot with, slow game against Clemson. They lost. They got blown out against Butler. A very odd loss to Denver in which they probably should have won. A blowout loss against Charleston. Just a really weird game pattern from this Citadel Bulldogs team, and they're not playing nearly as fast-paced as I've personally been accustomed to seeing them. Price-wise, we're not getting a break on any of these guys. Austin Ash, 7-7, Stephen Clark, 7-6, Madison Durr, 6-7, Elijah Morgan, 6-1, and David Maynard, 5-5. So it's not like we're getting any kind of discounts here. Typically, when you're looking at a team that's, projected to lose by 20-plus points and they're a low major, you want to get one of their high-usage guys and you want to try to find them on a discount. DK's not offering a discount, so it's kind of tough. Stephen Clark, 27.4% shot rate, 25% usage rate, 5.9% block rate. So you have him sitting there, 7-6. He is averaging 32 fantasy points per game. He has 40-plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3. And had a pretty solid, 21 fantasy points against Butler, 31 fantasy points against Clemson. Going up against North Carolina, that's going to be a very tough thing to do, especially up against Armando Bacot, who did return against Georgia Tech over the weekend and predictably went bazooka, 21 points, 13 rebounds on his way to 42 fantasy points against a very porous Georgia Tech defense. He is going to slaughter Citadel. He's going to get guys into foul trouble. Clark is somebody I would be really nervous about using. He does only have a 3.3 fouls per 40 called rate, which isn't horrible, but you probably have to times that by 2 or 3 playing in Chapel Hill against Armando Bacot, who draws a ton of fouls. So be careful if you're going to be looking towards Stephen Clark. Austin Ash playing 94.1% of the minutes. That's the 3rd highest amount of minutes in the country by percentage. He's sitting there at 7-7 though, so we're not getting a discount on him. He's not hitting a high enough watermark, 30 plus fantasy points enough for me to really justify paying this price. He did start the season 30 plus fantasy points in 3 straight. Then he had a real bad game against Butler, and then he's kind of just been, hit or miss since then. So Austin Ash sounds like he should probably be a tennis player, but he is kind of maybe just a GPP type of option here if you're looking at anyone on the Citadel. Madison Durr, 21.8% usage rate, 25.3% assist rate, drawing 4.5 fouls per 40. He is also getting called for 4.5 fouls per 40, so be careful there. he's fine, but 6'7", again, not really a great price coming off a almost 40 fantasy point game. Typically going to be in the mid-teens, though. So I'm not really going to be looking his way either. And I just don't have any real value options here. We're not getting a discount on the main Citadel guys. AJ Smith, the freshman, leads the team in usage at 36% and 34% shot rate. He's playing 25.3% of the minutes. You'll see after sitting out the first couple of games of the season, 13, 18, 17, 10, 3, and 20. So he would be a guy where at 4-3, if he were to, in this blowout, get 25-ish minutes, I think he could absolutely obliterate his 4-3 price tag because of his high usage, because of his high shot rate. But I'm not really prepared to sit here and use the dreaded gambling term on AJ Smith here when he could very well just end up playing 10 to 12 minutes and still not paying off 4-3. If he was 3K to 3.5, I would probably just plug him in and say, F it, give me the 15 minutes and whatever he gives me, but 4-3 is just high enough to where I'm not that interested. I don't feel that good about it. All right, North Carolina, come on and raise up. 8-7 for Baycott. That's a good price. I think that we can spend our money a little bit wiser. That Furman game, for example. We have the Memphis-Alabama game, which is going to be great. We have Omar Ballo, who I'm going to be really speaking the praises of here in a minute when we get to the Arizona game. You have Keon Brooks for my Huskies. There's just some other guys that I think I might want to pay up for, or maybe a more well-rounded, balanced Betty type of lineup. But Baycott at 8-7 is a really good price. I think 8-4 was a good price against Georgia Tech. If you waited to be able to swap into him, you really did well. Typically, we're going to be looking at him as a 9.5, almost 10K price player. The only thing to worry about here is if it does turn into a blowout game. Let's pull up an example here. Yeah, he's done pretty good in blowouts. JMU 80-64. He had 53. Gardner, it was only 72-66. That wasn't even a blowout, but he only had 25 fantasy points in that game. Over Charleston, 102-86. He had 45 over UNCW, which ended up being a less than 20-point blowout because of what happened late. In 28 minutes, he had 30 fantasy points. I do feel like we're looking at a 30 to 32 fantasy point game for him in the low 30s, upper 20s minutes. So that is how I would justify fading. Although in games that have been semi-blowouts, he has produced, he has gotten it done. So I don't mind Baycott. It's not going to be a situation where I'm adamantly going to be telling you tomorrow in the Discord, no, don't play Armando Baycott. He's, too high, or this matchup sucks, or blowouts. I typically try not to worry about blowouts in college basketball. You guys know that. Coaches are paranoid. They need to have margin of victory for their tournament resume. They're freaked out about getting fired. They have to, preserve these blowout wins when they happen. And I think that means Baycott's probably still going to play 30 to 34 minutes. And at 8-7, he's definitely going to pay that off against the Citadel. Citadel is a very, as I mentioned, porous defense. As far as their rebounding goes, they are one of the worst in the country. They're actually on offensive rebounding efficiency, 350th in the country, 282nd in defensive rebounding efficiency. They get their shot block at one of the highest rates in the country. They turn it over at a pretty high rate. There's just a lot to like here about Baycott. I'm starting to talk myself into actually paying up for him. But I don't want to force it because I don't, as you guys know, with these values lately, we're not getting these supreme, strong lock and load values like we were earlier in the season. Having to play more than two in a lineup is a very dangerous proposition. So if you're going to play Baycott and then a couple of these other values that are kind of, you better hope that Baycott hits 45 plus. Caleb Love at 8.2 is priced where he should be. RJ Davis at 8K is probably a little high. Leaky Black at 5.7 is there. It's kind of just like it's leaky. He can give you 25. He can give you 5. Probably not that much interest from me. So I'm not playing any of the North Carolina guards just because I think they're priced appropriately. I'd rather, again, go back to the Furman guys and play Bothwell. Pete Nance at 7.1 is intriguing. He's playing really well. Not quite to the level of Brady Manick last year, and we're seeing North Carolina sort of struggle at times without Manick. But Nance definitely has the ability to break the slate open. He has the ability to knock down threes. He has the ability to rebound at a high level and stay on the floor when Bacot gets into foul trouble. So I think at 7-1, he's a certifiable viable option in your main lineup if you want to go that route. And if you decide to fade Bacot, you may want to, for that $1,600 discount, look to play Pete Nance, because what you're hoping for with a Bacot fade is that, again, he hits the low 30s, upper 20s, and Nance either matches for cheaper, or best case scenario for you, he goes over and hits 40 fantasy points, plays throughout the blowout, hits a bunch of threes, rebounds at a high level. Bacot doesn't have to do a whole lot, and it's the Pete Nance show. That's a real potential outcome. So love to see Seth Trimble, the high-rated recruit, play more. He has played 23 minutes and 15 minutes in his last two after playing only 9, 7, and 5 over his last 3. So it's good to see, as they're into conference play, him playing more. Virginia Tech especially, he looked really good against Virginia Tech. 6 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, a block, and a steal. 72-80 loss for them because Justin Mutz went nuts. Oh, man, Justin Mutz. But 23 minutes for Seth Trimble. Sitting there at 3.9, I think he's an intriguing GPP value. All right, our next game on the slate is going to be the Florida State Seminoles, which is just an awful team to try to project on a game-by-game basis, playing USC Upstate. We'll start with USC Upstate, who has one of the worst defenses in the country, 346th per KenPom in defensive efficiency, 300th in offensive rebounding efficiency, 362nd in defensive rebounding efficiency. They're 5-4, wins over Coastal Carolina, Western Carolina, and South Carolina State, a couple of non-D1s as well. Losses against South Carolina, Clemson, Duke, and Air Force. They're probably, I would say they'll get stomped by Florida State, but this Florida State is just not good. Leonard Hamilton probably on his way out. They're 2-9. I don't know if people realize this, but they're literally 2-9 with losses against Stetson, UCF, Troy, Siena, Nebraska, and Stanford. Good losses against Purdue, Virginia, and Florida, but I don't know what the hell they're doing on a neutral court, losing by almost 20 points to Siena. At home against Stetson by 9. Like, holy shit, Leonard Hamilton, the game has passed him by. He has tortured DFS players for years, and it's come full circle. He has just got to be on his way out. I don't know how he can keep a job after this season, because Florida State may not actually win 15 games this season. But going up against USC Upstate, if they lose this game, he might not make it past tomorrow if they don't win this game. But the guys to know for USC Upstate here, let's pull that up, get you some usage rates and all that good stuff. The best player or highest usage player on the team is Jordan Gainey, sophomore, 6'4", 175, 30.1% usage rate, 32.4% shot rate, shooting 37% from long range on 33 attempts, and a 3% steal rate. 6.8K, definitely in play here against this Florida State squad. Somebody who I think will probably go a little overlooked, just because, USC Upstate playing against FSU, people are going to look for more names that they know. Huskies, Alabama, Memphis, UNC. Gainey could just kind of go a little bit under the radar. Maybe that's wishful thinking on my part. Definitely like him. He's somebody who's going to be in my player pool, my main team player pool for sure. Now, his last 3 games, he scored 39-plus fantasy points on DK. Box score chasers and game log watchers may see that, and that will potentially juice up his ownership/rostership a little bit more than I think. But I'm going to play it right now thinking that he's going to be under 30% owned. He has taken 17, 12, 14, 18, and 20 shots over his last 5. So taking a ton of shots, very odd patterns with 3-point shooting. Last time out, 4 for 12, then no 3 attempts, then 4 for 9, then 1 for 2, then 1 for 6. So very odd, no rhyme or reason with him the way he is taking his threes. but he is certainly the top option, I think, for Upstate. And in this particular game, they're at 6.8. Probably somebody who should be priced more at 8K. Nitpicking here, really, but definitely a guy to look at. Mista, gotta love this name, Mr. Goodlow. Played his first game this season last time out over the weekend. 24 minutes, 11 of 12 at the foul line. Did a very good job getting himself to the foul line. 20 real points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals for 34.5 fantasy points. Sitting there at 5.3. A bit risky, yes, because he has not been around. Just, I don't know that I want to necessarily jump all in here just to use him. Game did go to overtime. His usage rate was 30%, probably better suited as a GPP option. Because at the same time, I don't necessarily want to be stacking up USC Upstate. Although I do love mini stacking in college basketball. I think it's a winning maneuver long term. I don't think enough people do it. And it's been something that we've had a lot of success with over the last couple of years. So I don't hate the idea, but I don't have enough on Mista Goodlow to probably use him in my main lineup. More of a GPP option at this moment in time. But that's any indication, seeing how he played coming off the bench there against South Carolina State. If he's going to get those kind of minutes, 20 to 30 minutes off the bench, and eventually maybe even, take Nick Alves' spot in the starting lineup, or Floyd Riddell, who both of whom are not very good basketball players and not very effective. I think that, I would definitely want to have some interest there. And I would change my tune. If the starters come out tomorrow and Goodlow, jumps in the starting lineup over Rideau or Alves, I would certainly be in on him just based off of what we've seen in that first game. And then you got guys like Trey Brodnox at 6'4". He's priced appropriately, not that exciting. At 5'6", Justin Bailey, pretty priced appropriately, not that exciting. Really just becomes Jordan Gainey and nobody else, depending on the rest of the starting rotation. Kadarius Smith is a cheap starter sitting there at 4.2, so you could potentially use him for value. As a guy who, like I said, continues to start playing right around mid-20s, low to mid-20s minutes, has scored 17-plus fantasy points in 3 straight. If you're desperate for value, he's somebody that I think you could potentially use and be okay with. That's if you're not using Gainey or Goodlow, because, again, I'm not looking to 3-man stack USC Upstate, although it could win a tournament. All right, FSU side of things, they've had bad luck. They had their own Jalen Gainey, who has not played at all. He's out for the season. Cam Fletcher is going to be out for the season. Caleb Mills is in the midst of a season that is well below par of what we all expected. He's had some nice games here or there, but clearly not the leader that they need him to be. Matthew Cleveland, probably the most productive, the most consistent option on this Florida State team, priced fairly at 6'9". Darren Green, who is strictly a scorer and shooter, although he has been rebounding more lately, I'll give it to him. 30-plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3, 6'5", not getting a discount there. Naheem McLeod at 5'2", after he had a really solid outing against Louisville, 6 points, 5 rebounds, 6 blocks, which gave him 25 fantasy points. He goes from 3'9" up to 5'2". That's a tough price. And then Jalen Worley at 4'7", who is a habitual vanilla value option for the Seminoles, a guy that sub 5K is going to play, mid-20s minutes, maybe even low 30s. He's just not getting it done this year. After flashing last season, he's just not that guy, and it's really, even at 4'7", I'm finding myself not that excited about him, and I just don't know that he's main team viable at this moment in time. Cameron Corhan did break out a little bit, 15-5 in their last game, but again, that was against Louisville, so everyone pretty much breaks out against Louisville. I think Caleb Mills is going to end up being the popular option at 7K just because projections are going to like him. I think Matthew Cleveland is a better play at 6'9", just because he's a little more well-rounded of an option, a little more consistent. Darren Green at 6'5", all those guys bunched up. Those are your main guys. And again, Worley as your primary value, but again, I'm just not that excited about any of these guys. Okay. I'll finish up and then I'll help you. You need to go lay down, okay? Why don't you grab a... One moment, please. All right, back in action. Sorry about that, guys. Um, not only am I a CBB DFS grinder, but I'm also a parent of several young children. And they don't give a damn if I'm in the middle of a show or not. They want what they want. All right, next game. So let's skip past FSU. Ugly game. Going to be full of tilt. Arizona versus Texas A&M. There's a million of them. They're all horrible as well. Corpus Christi. Now, I have to give it to Arizona. I have to especially give it to their developmental staff and Omar Ballo, because coming into the season, I didn't want to believe that they could replicate what they did with Christian Coloco. Coloco was a role player for years. The new staff comes in, turns him into an absolute monster, gets drafted into the NBA. I guess I shouldn't say he got drafted, because I know he's in the NBA. Don't know if he got drafted or not. I don't follow the NBA that closely. It's on my deathbed, okay? But never in a million years did I think they would replicate that with Omar Ballo. Now, I watched Ballo play for the Zags in a very limited role, 7-footer, almost 300 pounds. Really, really whiffed. Tommy Lloyd heads out of Gonzaga, gets the Arizona job, takes Ballo with him, and Ballo is just balling. My God. I was so wrong on Omar Ballo, and I don't mind telling anyone who I had this debate with preseason in the Pac-12 preview shows and all this about Ballo, because he is freaking phenomenal. To start the season off here, through 9 games, 24.4% usage rate, 23.8% shot rate. His effective field goal percentage is 6th best in the country at 75.9%. Top 30 true shooting percentage. A defensive rebounding rate of 24.6%. An offensive rebounding rate of 12.1%. Block rate of 6.5%. Drawing 8.1 fouls per 40. And you put all that together, do the little Ken Pom formula for his minutes, his role. That's 4th best in the country. Just phenomenal what he's been able to do. He's shooting 76% from the field, 66 for 87. Doesn't shoot threes, doesn't need to. He's just one of those throwback dominant centers. Now, I realized that I was wrong on Ballo back, what was it, the Creighton game, I believe, when he had 30 points and 13 rebounds and a 2-point win against Creighton. That's when I knew I was dead wrong on him, and I had to pay attention to this kid the rest of the way. Against Indiana, 15-12. Against Cal, 17-7. 22-7 against Utah in a tough loss. Against San Diego State, 12-9, which was kind of a lower end game for him. 21-10 against Cincinnati. 18-9 against Nichols. 17-8 against Southern. 16-11 against Utah Tech. Just churning game after game after game of just monstrous stats. Omar Ballo deserves to be a top option for you. This is a game that is going to be a blowout on the Arizona side of things. They're definitely going to pile drive this squad into oblivion. DK doesn't even have a line for this game. Let's see. Sometimes they won't on these blowouts. Let's see what Pick Dogs has to say about it. Minus 23 for Arizona, over under of 159.5. I would probably say that this might be a 30-point win. I don't like to take big spreads, but Arizona's going to cover that 23 in this particular game. Texas A&M Corpus Christi, very bad rebounding squad. Defensively, they're pretty mediocre. They haven't really played anyone, but earlier in the season, Mississippi State, they got completely smashed 63-44. In that particular game, a man, Tolu Smith, had 19-11. Expect something similar as a floor for Ballo. Going up against UTEP, that was a 72-67 game. Jamari Sibley had 12-7. Their other posts, 5-9. Zirik Onyemema, not really household names for UTEP this season. Look for Omar Ballo to put up a monster like 20-15 type of game in this particular matchup. We won't be able to probably play him and Armando Bacot together. Price-wise, it's just not going to fit. But Ballo at 8-9, I don't know if I should feel this way because it's the same situation as Bacot, a blowout game. Maybe his minutes are going to be a little bit effective, but there's more options on North Carolina. I think Arizona, Ramey, Tubelis, Krisa, Larson, Cedric Henderson, like they've got guys who will get theirs from time to time, but nobody like on North Carolina who has to have the ball. I feel like they're just going to feed Ballo in this matchup and let him go to work and do damage. If anything, Azuolas Tubelis might pip him enough to where it hurts him a little bit. They're both priced about essentially the same. But I'm on the Ballo train at this point. So I do favor Omar Ballo over Armando Bacot, even though it's a almost identical situation in the blowout. And I just made a case for why we would want to fade Bacot, but I can't make that same case for Ballo because of the rotation. And in blowout games already, Ballo has shown that he will absolutely nut on these low major teams that have no business trying to guard him. If he plays 30 minutes, if he plays, let's give him 25 minutes. If Ballo plays only 25 minutes, I'm still confident he's going to score 40 fantasy points. I'm not that same confident in Armando Bacot if he were to only play 25 minutes. Could be eating those words this time tomorrow night, but that is where I'm really kind of drawing my line in the sand and playing the Omar Ballo kid here at 8-9. Tubelis at 8-8 is fine as well. Same price point. I think I'd probably play Tubelis and GBP. Ballo is my main team guy. Kerr Krisa, I remember playing him at min price 2 seasons ago, so it's hard for me to get behind him at 7-2. He is a solid option, but again, rather just go up to Bothwell or one of the NC State guards, or we're going to get into this Bama-Memphis game as well. Courtney Ramey at 6'4". I do prefer him. If I'm playing a non-Omar Ballo Arizona player, I do think Courtney Ramey is the guy to look at. 8+ shots in every single game this season. 3 of his last 4, he's played over 35 minutes. It's a very strong, play. Transferring from Texas to this Arizona squad was the best thing for him. He's playing really, really well right now. You have Pele Larson, who is a bit of a turnover machine at 5'9". Definitely in play, somebody who could pay that off, mid-20s fantasy points. I think that's kind of a fine mid-range type of play. Cedric Henderson at 5'5", I think is a decent GPP look. And then Adama Ball, who has all the talent in the world, but just can't break through for minutes just yet. If he were to break through and they were to give him somewhere between 19 to 23 minutes in this matchup, if it blows out, he's going to murder the 4K price point. So don't look at Adama Ball as a main team value, but absolutely if you're doing the MME thing on this particular slate, I think you want to have, 2 or 3 shares of Ball, because he has the talent to absolutely rip against Corpus Christi and score over a fantasy point per minute. We just need him to hit kind of that 18-minute mark, and he'll obliterate. There is a possibility he plays only 8 minutes though, and that's why he's not quite a main team option for us just yet. Talent's there though. Corpus Christi, going up against a tough Arizona squad. Isaac Mushila is the top option in terms of averages, rates, all that stuff. 22% usage rate, 4.1% steal rate. He has a combined rebounding rate of almost 45%. Drawing 5.5 fouls per 40, only 6'5", but plays much bigger. Definitely a guy to look at, sitting there at 7'8", averaging almost 40 fantasy points, but going up against, Ballo and Tubelis front court. This is a very, very small Corpus Christi squad. They run to Lazarus Keys at 6'8" at center a lot. Isaac Mushila at 6'5". He plays a lot of center. Simeon Fryer at 6'5". He's tasked with playing some center. They do have a 7'3" kid by the name of Connor Kern, who is completely raw, 7'3", 280. Total square. Can't really move, can't do a whole lot. Not really the answer. Probably won't get a lot of minutes, but they do have him if they need him. Ballo is drawing 8.1 fouls per 40. I know I mentioned that earlier, but I want that to sink into your head in case you do want to get cute with some of these Corpus Christi guys. Tubelis is drawing 5.1 fouls per 40. Pele Larson's drawing 4.9 fouls per 40. Kirk Reese at 3.7 fouls per 40. So there's going to be a lot of foul trouble for these Corpus Christi guys. Mushila is definitely the guy I'm looking at as probably getting into the most foul trouble here. Save him for GPP. That's fine. Just don't think you're going to plug him in there into your main lineup. He's 7'8". Don't do that. Tyrion Murdex at 7'1". I would actually probably look to him a little more. 25% usage rate, 24% shot rate, 5% steal rate, drawing 4.7 fouls per 40, has a 31% assist rate. A little bit more well-rounded there. Not quite the level of Mushila. Doesn't have the slate-breaking upside of Mushila, but definitely somebody who's viable and okay to use at 7'1" if you want. And then you have Trevian Tennyson playing mid-20s minutes at 6'3", has scored 22-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, the third most viable option on this team. I don't like it. I don't like this Corpus Christi team. I feel very ill about using them against Arizona. I just foresee a lot of foul issues for all of their team. I think Arizona's going to get that home whistle, and I think they're going to end up just living at the foul line. Ballo's just going to be medieval good in this matchup here, and I don't think Corpus Christi deserves much of your attention unless you're running 10-plus lineups. Moving on to the Memphis versus Alabama game. Bama's 6.5-point favorite, a total of 149. I think that has the potential to go over. Starting with Memphis, we have to absolutely look at DeAndre Williams sitting there at 8K. They are pricing him appropriately at this point. He was a lock and load there in that low 7K range. A couple of weeks ago against Ole Miss, had that 17-14, 7-game, 50 fantasy points. Followed that up with 35 and 38. Really solid outing against Auburn, in which he had 16, 11, and 3. Going up against Alabama, 8K. I'm saving up some salary. I think I want to have DeAndre Williams in my lineup. He's playing the best basketball of his life right now. Next to Kendrick Davis, life is good. Memphis is 8-2. Wins over Auburn, Stanford, Nebraska, VCU, and Vanderbilt, along with Ole Miss. A really close loss by 1 to Seton Hall in the neutral court, and then a very close loss against a very underrated St. Louis team, which was a road game. But I think they have an opportunity to cover and or possibly even beat this Alabama squad. DeAndre Williams, 24.6% usage rate, 24.6% shot rate. He's shooting 36% from long range. He has a combined rebounding rate of 32%. And a 22.5% assist rate, 5% block rate, 3% steal rate. He does a little bit of everything, can fill it up, a triple-double threat for sure. Now that he's taking double-digit shots in each of his last 3 games, he's just elevated his game that much more. he is the top option for me in this particular game, even more so than my man Kendrick Davis, who comes in at 8-7. Kendrick Davis is solid, but he's hitting 25 more than he's hitting 40, which is why I'm looking to DeAndre Williams instead. Kendrick does have a very high usage rate, 31.5%, 31.3% shot rate, 29.5% assist rate, 3% steal rate, drawing 5.7 fouls per 40, 90% free throw shooter, will generate a ton of points there at the free throw line. You have Alex Lomax there at 6'7". That's too high. Keontae Kennedy at 5'1". Seem to always get asked about Kennedy. I don't know why. He was just a mediocre player at his previous stop at UTEP anyways. Now he's come over to Memphis, and he's just kind of a mid-teens fantasy player. Don't get sucked into that 5'1" price point. I think there's better options for us to look at. So I don't like Kennedy, but I know I'm going to get asked about him anyways. Chandler Lawson at 4.3, Elijah McCadden at 3.8, Jaden Hardaway at 4.1. Those are your cheapies. I still think the Lawson brothers deserve more than what they're getting from Penny Hardaway. I think Chandler Lawson at 4.3 is the most playable value on this Memphis team. He has played 20-plus minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. Check that. In 6 of his last 7 games. Definitely viable, not taking a ton of shots, but he is contributing in rebounds, other categories, more so than John Lawson. Johnny Lawson just seems to be kind of on the outside looking in. But Chandler Lawson, 9.9% offensive rebounding rate, usage rate about 15%, shooting roughly 59 to 60% from the field, steal rate of 2%. He does have an almost 5 fouls per 40 rate, so there is a foul issue there for him. But at 4.3, he's another one of those kind of low to mid 4K range intriguing options for GBP value purposes. On the Alabama side, it's really all about Brandon Miller, the freshman. He just kind of exploded during their foreign trip. He's only 8.2 in this matchup. I absolutely love him. I think that, if you can fit him and not play Baycott, he's definitely a great option. He struggled against Houston. Everybody does. He had a very mediocre game in the overtime win against North Carolina. But you look at, SDSU, 31 fantasy points, UConn, 38, MSU, 42, Jackson State, 48, Liberty, 42, South Alabama, 35. Just a really strong player. Watching him versus DeAndre Williams is going to be a real treat. I'm looking forward to watching this game in particular and seeing those two guys play. Miller, the kind of one-and-done NBA guy, versus the strong, 4 or 5 year collegiate player DeAndre Williams. That's just going to be a fun game. Brandon Miller, 27% shot rate, 23.5% usage rate, 43% from long range, 8.1% offensive rebounding rate, drawing 5.2 fouls per 40. Mark Sears is there at 6'6". I think 6'6" is a decent GBP price for him. Just kind of lukewarm for me. I think Miller is a better price. We're seeing Javon Quinterly start to play at least a little bit more. 44 minutes against UNC, 21 against SDSU, and then against Houston back to only 13 at 4.8. He's worth a shot in GPP, and he's borderline main team viable. Noah Clowney, the other youngster there at 6'4", with Miller kind of struggling. He has ascended 22, 9, and 4 against SDSU for 43 fantasy points, and then 16 points, 11 rebounds against Houston for 36 fantasy points in a nice win over Houston in which Miller struggled. So Clowney has played 25 plus minutes in 4 of his last 5 games as well. So he's starting to see him really start to ascend. They're just blessed with freshmen. They've done a very nice job under Nate Oates bringing in this class and transfers between Namari Burnett and Mark Sears, and then standbys like Javon Quinterly, but Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney and Jaden Bradley is a really nice freshman group, and then Charles Bediako, the 7-footer, can't be forgotten about either. Pretty hit or miss. He's only 4'9" though. If he can keep himself from getting into foul trouble, he can absolutely put up 25 plus fantasy points. He had 48 against North Carolina, 14 and 16. That's what he can do. The issue with Bediako is the fact that he's a walking fouler. 6.1 fouls per 40 called on him. So you're another sub 5K guy where I'm lukewarm about using him in my main lineup. He's absolutely in play for GPPs. If you're right about him, he gets into, doesn't get into foul trouble and is able to play 25 to 30 minutes against Memphis. He's going to put up a 35 ball against them at 4-9. If you're wrong, he gets 2 early fouls. Then he comes in the second half, picks up that 3rd foul. It's over. It's just, he's going to have 8 fantasy points. You're probably done with him at that 4-9 price because he's just high enough to nuke your lineup if he doesn't produce. But Bediako is definitely a strong player when he's not fouling. And then the other freshman, Jaden Bradley, who I mentioned briefly, 21 plus minutes in 3 of his last 5. 5K, he's pretty much 4X guy there if you need him at that 5K price point. So I like some Bama options. I don't want to get into chasing Clowney just yet, but that 6'4" price point is certainly nice. He's been able to really do well. Dom Welch, the St. Bonaventure transfer, has just not been healthy, hasn't been able to play. Amari Burnett and Noah Gurley have been pretty mediocre, but they're giving them enough minutes. But between Clowney, Sears, Miller, and sometimes Javon Quinterly, they've been able to hold it down. This Bama team is really quite good and fun for DFS purposes as well. I think Brandon Miller gets a lot of the attention, but there's some other options on this team we can look at. So I'm probably looking to play 2, maybe even 3 guys from this group, this actual game. DeAndre Williams is a lock and load. One of Clowney, Bediako, Quinterly, Miller, and then possibly running it back with a value guy. If I'm brave and want to go Bediako or Quinterly, one of those guys. We'll see how my build ends up. All right, Washington Huskies are the last game on the slate here, going against Cal Poly. Again, far cry. They're not a guarantee to win. They are 12-point favorites. It's 126.5 over under. Not very high at all. At this point, you should know the names on Washington here. Keon Brooks, the Kentucky transfer. He is my guy. 28.8% usage rate, 26% shot rate, 18.4% defensive rebounding rate, 3.8% block rate, drawing 6.1 fouls per 40. He's had a little bit of foul trouble here or there. That did affect him in his last game there. 4 fouls against Gonzaga in 29 minutes. We always suck against Gonzaga. People were asking me about Huskies 16.5, plus 16.5. This seems like a lot. Gonzaga's not beating anyone, blah, blah, blah. We always suck against Gonzaga. I told people not to bet it. I hope they didn't. I know some did. They struggled. Against Colorado, he was fairly mediocre as well in 30 minutes, 14, 7, and 4. Good score, 28.25 fantasy points. Really want to see him over 30 at this 7.7 price point. I think we do see him get back to it. That win over St. Mary's, in which he played, in the overtime, 43 minutes, 14 points, 11 rebounds. That really showed what kind of player Keon Brooks could be. He's healthy. He's looking 100%. He's going to be, getting to play an on-paper inferior Cal Poly team. Again, I don't want to get into this. Well, they should beat them by 1,000,000 because we couldn't even beat, Cal Baptist. They beat us by 9. This is the same Cal Baptist team that Cal Poly was able to beat by 11 and their home floor. So a little bit scared about this one. We do have Cal Poly. They're a pretty mediocre rebounding team offensively. They're a pretty mediocre defense. They're a horrible offense. Just a lot of things that Keon Brooks should be able to do in this particular matchup. We just have to hope he does it. Other options to look at for the Husky side of things. Cole Badgema had a really nice game last time out. He's 6K. I don't love paying that price for him. I did use him on that last slate at 5.7. He has scored 25 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, 19 plus in 4 straight. Really nice 12, 6, and 2 game. Hit a couple of threes on his way to 27 fantasy points against Gonzaga. Definitely has to be considered an option, even at the 6K price point, which is a little bit high. That would get into a situation where you may want to just play Clowney instead for the upside, but Badgema might have him beat there with the higher floor. You have Jamal Bay at 6K, been on the team forever, gonna play, 25 to 30 minutes, roughly 18 to 22 fantasy points per game. We have a lot of those guys. PJ Fuller, same thing, 25 to 30 minutes, 18 to 22 fantasy points, 5.7, that's fine. Frank Kepnong is out, so Braxton Maya has been, kind of the guy down low. Did suffer some foul issues against Gonzaga, had some foul issues against Colorado, was in a boot recently. I think he matches up and should have a really nice bounce back spot here, but he's 6'9". We're not getting a discount. I'm not probably going to pay 6'9" for Braxton Mia, even though I think he's fine. It's only 800 more for Keon Brooks, who I infinitely trust much more. And I think that just seems like kind of a no-brainer to me. The high usage youngster, Keon Menefeld, he's not quite to the level of being a DFS regular play yet. With Noah Williams, out and Keon Brooks missing some time, his usage rate was super high and he was scoring some, points, had a really high shot rate. If there were to be some additional injuries that happen, he would become playable again. 4-4, another one of those maybe GPP viable guys, but I'm not quite there with him yet. I'd rather, if you want to use a main team value from this team, play Koren Johnson, whose minutes are definitely up over Menefield. The local kid, high school legend around the Seattle parts. They're playing him more minutes. He's still raw, as you can see, 12 fantasy points to 19, 12, 14. But he's only 3.8. He offers pretty decent savings because we're going to see him play mid-20s minutes. He's getting a matchup that is, again, on paper, beatable for him. This is a spot where he should be able to hit some shots. If he can add anything, in the other categories, such as assists, rebounds, blocks, steals, that's that much better. Otherwise, he's going to be really reliant upon his scoring. But I do like him at 3.8 and think that he's a fine option overall, as long as Noah Williams continues to be out. That knee injury for Noah Williams, it's not getting better. We'll keep an eye out, though, because if he suddenly is cleared to play in this game, he's only 4-1, even though he's been out since, early November. That would just be too cheap of a price not to take a shot on him. He automatically become the top value on the slate. For Cal Poly, Huskies defense is just kind of atrocious. Everything about them is atrocious. This Cal Poly team's they're kind of reminding me of the Citadel. They're not offering us a lot of discounts here, though. So I don't really have a lot of excitement for any of their players because Alamani Karoma, the highest usage on the team at 25%, a shot rate of 24.1%, 39% three-point shooter, block rate of 3%, 6.1 fouls per 40, 6.8K. That's just not that great of a price to really be paying. I would much rather just pay Jordan Gainey of USC Upstate for the same price. I feel a lot better about him, even though the matchup may be on paper better for Karoma. Trevon Taylor at 6'5". Again, price probably fairly, even borderline overpriced. 20.1% shot rate, 18.4% defensive rebounding rate, 37% range, long range shooter. Brantley Stevenson at 6'3", same thing, a little bit overpriced, 24.4% shot rate, 37% three-point shooter. And then you have Chance Hunter there at 5'9". Another starter, 21.3% shot rate, 37% three-point shooter, drawing 4.5 fouls per 40. The typical starting lineup for Cal Poly consists of the following: Trevon Taylor, Chance Hunter, Brantley Stevenson, Alamami Karoma, and Cameron Pierce, with Kobe Sanders, Nick Fleming, and Brian Penn Johnson as their main bench options. Brian Penn Johnson used to play for the Huskies a couple of seasons ago. Role player, expected to really bounce off and be a strong guy. Then he transferred to LSU, didn't play really much for them, killed the JUCO level. Now he's back playing for Cal Poly. So if you're into revenge narratives, you do have that option here with Brian Penn Johnson sitting there at 3.5. It's not going to play a whole lot, though, so I don't know how reckless you want to get here. He's probably looking at 8 to 10 minutes. So even at 3.5, I'd much rather play Koren Johnson. But that Penn Johnson's going to be looking to, a highlight dunk or two here against the Huskies and a team that really just kind of gave up on him very early in his career. So that wraps up the slate. Core-wise, I'm looking at the following. DeAndre Williams of Memphis. I think that's a really obvious play. There's a ton between 7K and 8K, it's just totally loaded. 6'8", USC Upstate, Jordan Gainey. He's the second member of the core for me. And then I'm really leaning towards Mike Bothwell. It's going to be hard because I know I want to play Ballo. I want to play one of these NC State guys. I want to play Keon Brooks. I'm going to have to play some value. So core-wise, I'm giving you guys some higher price guys in Bothwell, Gainey, and DeAndre Williams. But I am looking at value-wise, Javon Quinterly, Charles Bediako, Jaden Bradley of Bama, all of them, of course, but one or two. Corin Johnson of Washington, Jalen Worley of FSU, even though he makes me shudder. Seth Trimble of North Carolina. I think that might be a little bit sneaky. And then on the Furman side, we have Marcus Foster, JP Pegus, and Garrett Hyen. So we have some cheapies. We're going to have to make some decisions here. You're not going to be able to play Baycott and Ballo together. I think you're going to probably want to start with one of them, and you want to come down, decide between, Bothwell, Keon Brooks, Jarkel Joyner, guys like that. Me, I'm on Gainey. Me, I'm on DeAndre Williams. And I'm on Bothwell. I think Bothwell is going to put up a really high number against NC State, and he's going to go really overlooked as well. PrizePicks wise, let's see what the early PrizePicks board offers us. There isn't a ton just yet. Man, they're giving the Cal Poly guys really, really low numbers. Trevon Taylor, even though I don't like his price on DK, 18.1 fantasy points against my Huskies. I like the over there. I would certainly be looking to hit that particular number. Isaiah Wilkins of Longwood, over 22.3 fantasy points against St. Francis, New York. Isaiah Wilkins, a former Virginia Tech role player. He's somebody who played well for Longwood last year, was a mediocre role player for Wake Forest for a season before that at Virginia Tech, but somebody who can definitely pay that off and hit the over there in this particular matchup. So over 22.3 fantasy points on Isaiah Wilkins. They also have Wallen Napper. Wallen Napper, may remember him from Southern Miss, kind of a higher usage guy there. They're also kind of sucking me in with that number, 21.7, but I'll stick to Wilkins as my featured play from the show. And then the board is pretty light right now, so we will have some more. As of right now, Trevon Taylor over 18.1 fantasy points and Isaiah Wilkins over 22.3. Now, my man DeAndre Williams sticks out there as well. 7.5 rebounds versus Bama. I like his number over 7.5 rebounds. Check back in with me in the morning, though, in Discord, in the PrizePicks room or the CBB room when the board is filled back out further. We'll have some additional plays there that we can look at. But those are the looks right now. There are very few props available on DraftKings at the moment. They only have the Memphis-Alabama game up. They only have DeAndre Williams and Kendrick Davis. Again, DeAndre Williams over 7.5 rebounds, which is currently minus 120 on DraftKings. That is what I'm looking at there. All right, we have reached the end of our destination together. I feel pretty good about the slate. I think that we have a good handle on it. I think the core that we've given is very strong. The options between 7K to 9K, picking out 4 is going to be pretty simple. Where it gets dicey is these sub 5K options, as there's a lot of risk involved with them. We're going to have to take a value or two that we're not that comfortable with. And when that tends to happen, I like to lean towards minutes, which is why Corin Johnson is probably going to become one of the top values for me. All right, that is all, guys. Thanks a lot. I have to get out of here as my youngest daughter does not feel she needs to go to sleep. So take care, guys. Appreciate it, and best of luck tomorrow.